Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced. I've played it and I've been fortunate enough to get a review copy, and for the past 2 weeks I've been playing it a ton, doing pretty much everything the game has to offer. I finished the amazing main story, explored countless islands, completed the Assassination Contracts, Naval Contracts, forts, Templar hunts, officer quest lines, the new Blackbeard treasure hunt, the new Stede Bonnet mission, the new rifts, the new Mayan chapter, collected a ton of outfits and so much more. So the first question I want to ask is Black Flag Resynced worth it? Well, at $60 I think there's enough to justify the price. Not only is this a remake of the 2013 original, but it genuinely feels like the definitive version of Black Flag. Being able to experience Edward Kenway's story again, which I still consider one of the best stories in the entire franchise, was an absolute treat, especially with the updated motion capture and modern visuals of today. Before I played this, my top 3 Assassin's Creed games were Assassin's Creed 2, Black Flag and Origins. Now I can confidently say Black Flag Resynced has completely replaced the original Black Flag for me. That's just how much I enjoyed it. It stays faithful to the original by leaving the main story untouched. There are a few changes here and there which I'll get into later, but the entire heart of the story remains the same. At the same time, they've completely overhauled the combat, mixing the cinematic feel of the older games with a more traditional hitbox based system. Now make no mistake, this is not a perfect remake. It has its flaws, and some of them are pretty significant, but to me the positives far outweigh the negatives by a huge margin. So with that said, let's start where every great single player game begins, and that's the main story. Now, if you're watching this and you've never played Assassin's Creed Black Flag, I'd recommend skipping to the timestamp on screen, because from this point on, I will be talking about the story in full, and there are major story spoilers ahead. For me, there are only a handful of Assassin's Creed games that genuinely have good stories. The Ezio trilogy, Assassin's Creed 3, Black Flag and Origins. So getting to experience Edward Kenway's journey again was something I was genuinely excited for. If you followed my channel for a while, you'd already know that I think the story should always be the #1 priority in any Assassin's Creed game. Thankfully, that's exactly what this remake gets right, because the main story is still Black Flag's greatest strength. For anyone who's already played the original, seeing those memorable moments recreated with modern visuals and motion capture was incredible. I mean, this scene in particular is still one of my favorites.
Oh, don't sit there like a barrel of wet fish. We're celebrating my retirement!
Not only that, being able to witness Blackbeard's death, Mary Reed's final moments, and of course the parting glass at the very end all just hit us hard, if not harder. It brings a fresh emotional weight to Edward's story that made me appreciate the game all over again. Even seeing the Haytham, Jennifer, Edward and Birch scene at the theatre with modern visuals looks stunning. It really makes me want a remake of a game like Assassin's Creed Rogue, because I feel like that game out of every Assassin's Creed game deserves a more expanded story. Every character model has seen a huge improvement, and while the mission layouts stay almost identical to the original, the presentation has been polished across the story. Even the lighting has been fixed in several scenes. Remember this scene from the reveal trailer where Edward and Adewale escaped the storm, yet everything looked bright and sunny? Well, in Resynced, the weather actually matches the scene, making it feel far more believable. Beyond the visual upgrades though, one of the biggest improvements is the pacing. Ubisoft actually listened to years of criticism and reworked the infamous tailing missions. There are far fewer of them throughout the main story now, which makes the whole thing flow much better. Thankfully, they did not remove all of them. The important ones are still here, like following the gunboat through the swamps of Charlestown. That mission in particular looks absolutely stunning now, and the atmosphere is on another level. Talking about atmosphere, Principe might actually be one of my favorite locations in the remake. The slave fortress looks really well done, and weirdly enough, it reminded me of Guarma from Red Dead Redemption 2. It feels completely separate from the rest of Black Flag's Caribbean, with its own architecture and color palette. Now, since this is a remake, Ubisoft has also made a few changes to the story itself to better fit where Assassin's Creed is today. One change I actually really like is Julian Ducas's assassination on Great Inagua. In the original game, the mission was very straightforward. You enter and exit the jungle, you make your way to his ship and and kill him. Black Flag Resynced turns it into something much more open. You can overhear conversations, discover clues about where he's hiding, even explore the mansion itself during the mission, and while you're there, you can steal his portrait, which later becomes important if you decide to renovate the mansion. You can also free prisoners who'll join the fight on the beach, making the assault on Ducasse much easier. It feels like a much more dynamic assassination mission without changing the overall outcome. I also ended up really liking the redesigned memory corridors. At first, I wasn't sold because they replaced the classic green animus corridor with this black void covered in shallow water, but after seeing more of them, I actually prefer it. It feels more grounded and reminds me a lot of the memory corridors from Origins, which was some of my favorites in the entire franchise. The biggest story change, however, comes from Bartholomew Roberts' memory corridor. In the original Black Flag, Roberts reveals that he's one of many sages born throughout history, all carrying the memories of Aita. He references Juno, who is still a very important part of the modern day back in 2013, and tells Edward to destroy his body before the Templars can recover it. None of that exists anymore in Resynced. Considering how the Juno storyline eventually ended in a comic book after years of build-up, removing those references, to be honest, makes sense. That plotline simply isn't relevant anymore, so the remake completely strips it out. The scene itself has changed as well. Instead of Roberts laying on the ground bleeding out, he's standing beside Edward as his ship sinks beneath the waves. Instead of talking about Juno, Aita, or the sages, Roberts reflects on somebody he loved and spent years thinking about her while sailing the seas. The conversation also changes its attention toward Edward himself, focusing on what he hopes to achieve after killing Roberts and where his journey is taking him. Every mention of the old Juno and Aita storyline has been removed. That also ties into another big change, which is the removal of the modern day. Now, the idea of having no modern day is something I don't like at all. I enjoyed it in the original Black Flag and I think it added something unique, but without it, the main story in Resynced never gets interrupted anymore. Edward's story plays out from the beginning to end without constantly pulling you out of the animus. Instead, Ubisoft has added 4 optional rifts if you want to explore that side of the game. I'll talk a lot more about these rifts later in the video because I've got quite a few thoughts on how they work. One thing I absolutely loved though was the El Tiburon boss fight. They kept him every bit as intimidating as he was in the original game, while making the fight itself much more interesting. I do wish they added the scene where Edward Kenway gets bested by El Tiburon, because he still says he bested him before, despite us never seeing that playable scene. In Resynced, his helmet makes him completely invulnerable, so the first thing you have to do is lure him near an explosive barrel and blow it up to stagger him. That knocks his helmet off, exposing his head, which becomes the only place you can reliably damage him while he relentlessly throws unblockable attacks at you. It's a genuinely creative boss fight, and while it sells just how much of a monster El Tiburon is as Torres' bodyguard, I had a great time with it, so credit where it's due. Ubisoft did a really good job here. They also absolutely nailed the set pieces, keeping them almost identical to the original. Take the chase after the captain during the Siege of Charlestown mission. Every bit of that sequence is still there. The same parkour routes, the same jumps, even the crocodile waiting below to eat you if you miss your jump. It's recreated almost perfectly, and I just love seeing it again. Another great example is Don't Go Gently, where you're sprinting back to the Jackdaw while everything around you is exploding. That whole escape is just as intense as it was in the original game. I like that they didn't try to reinvent these moments. They simply recreated them faithfully, and hey, that's exactly what I wanted from this remake. Now, I do have a few negatives, because while the original story remains fantastic and is probably the best story in the entire franchise hands down in my opinion, some of the new additions remind you why modern Ubisoft still struggles in certain areas. After Blackbeard's death at the hands of Robert Maynard, which is actually an addition I really liked because you finally get to see Maynard himself, there's a brand new main story cutscene back at Great Inagua. Edward raises a glass to Blackbeard, talks about the legacy he leaves behind, and speaks about the future of the hideout while your officers stand around listening. On paper, it's quite a nice scene. The problem is that none of it's motion captured. I know I bring up motion capture a lot and I sound like a parrot, but I have to keep talking about this until Ubisoft changes something. Motion capture genuinely matters in storytelling. The issue is you go straight from Blackbeard's beautifully mocap dead scene into this brand new cutscene where Edward and everyone around him moves like they are robots. They just stand there with stiff animations and robotic body language. It completely clashes with everything that came before it like 2 minutes ago. That's what makes it so disappointing. Ubisoft did not have to redo the original cutscenes because they were already there. They had 3 or 4 years to focus purely on the new content. Give them proper performances and make them blend smoothly with the rest of the game's already existing mocap main story. Instead, Every single piece of newly written dialogue sticks out for the wrong reasons, and I'll get into the new content much later in the video because it's honestly one of my biggest issues with the remake. Now, another thing I noticed was Matt Ryan's performance. Now, this is not really a complaint because it's just a natural part of life. Before I say anything though, I want to make it clear that I love Matt Ryan. He's a fantastic actor, and after meeting him in Paris, he's such a great and down-to-earth human. But over 13 years have passed since the original Black Flag, and his voice just isn't the same Edward Kenway it was back then.
Blast. These pirates were cut down where they sat. Are they so ruthless that they killed these blighters and left their valuables to rot?
Now, maybe I noticed it more because I played the original Black Flag a bazillion times, but every new recorded line stands out almost immediately. His voice is deeper and rougher now, which is not really the issue. The issue I have is the delivery. A lot of the new dialogue feels like it was recorded with very little direction. Simple lines like, "There should be treasure nearby," or "What's happened here?" are delivered in a very flat, almost robotic tone. There's very little conviction behind them, and it never feels like Edward Kenway is genuinely reacting to what's happening around him. That's why I don't really blame Matt Ryan. To me, this feels more like a voice direction issue than an acting issue. It sounds like he was brought into a recording booth, given a list of lines and not much context for how they should be delivered. Compare those new recordings to the original game's dialogue, and the difference is very noticeable. Back then, Edward had so much personality in every line. Whether he was angry, sad, sarcastic, excited or frustrated, you could hear it in his voice. The new dialogue just doesn't have that same energy, and again, that's most likely an issue with the voice direction. Ironically, he actually sounds like an older, more experienced Edward Kenway, which would fit perfectly if this story took place years later. So hey, if you ever make a Black Flag 2, it would be perfect. But when those new lines are placed right next to dialogue recorded back in 2013, the contrast is impossible to miss. It really hits you. And again, I completely understand. This is Edward Kenway's voice actor. There is nobody else I'd want playing him. But speaking of voice acting, this remake replaces Roger Craig Smith. If you remember the Italian diplomat that you tailed during one of the missions, that's no longer Roger Craig Smith, aka Ezio's voice actor anymore, voicing him. It's an entirely different voice actor now.
Stay here. I will use this alley to relieve myself.
I'm guessing that's probably down to licensing or contractual reasons. Maybe Ubisoft could not reuse his original performance for the remake. Whatever the reason, it's another small change that longtime fans will probably notice right away. Now, in my opinion, the biggest selling point of Black Flag Resynced, outside of the main story, is the exploration. I've always enjoyed exploring in the original Black Flag. Yes, at the end of the day, it is still classic Ubisoft. You're sailing around collecting chests, Mayan stones, letters in a bottle, and all the usual collectibles. But what makes it work here is that the world itself is interesting enough that I actually wanted to keep exploring. Black Flag Resynced makes that even better because the islands do not look all the same. Every camp, every settlement, every city, pretty much every explorable location feels different. This isn't like, let's say Assassin's Creed Odyssey, for example, which is a game I like, but I can admit you'll start noticing the exact same Greek towns copied and pasted across the map. Remember, this is a remake of a game built by the old Ubisoft, back when they really cared about making locations feel different from each other. The amount of environmental detail is on another level. The foliage is so much more denser than before. Seriously, just sail over to Kingston, for example, and if you head into the back of Kingston, you'll see a jungle. The sheer amount of trees, vegetation, and just, undergrowth makes it feel like a proper tropical island. It feels like what Black Flag would look like if it had been built for current generation hardware from the ground up. The cities benefit just as much. They are packed with a shit ton of NPCs, and every single place you go to, there's always something happening around you. It gives the Caribbean far more life than the original ever could. That said, it's important to remember that this is still a remake, not a complete reimagining. The islands are not fully explorable like they are in the RPG games. You can access every area that was explorable in the original Black Flag, but you still can't just climb over every mountain or wander into every part of the island. The overall layout is still faithful to the 2013 game, and I like that. It does not try to be a standard open world game, but more so areas that are open-ended. Now let's start with Havana first, because I'd say this is the main city of the game, alongside of course Kingston and Nassau. It's also probably the most detailed city in the entire game by far. When I made my video after playing the game for 3 hours, I mentioned that Ubisoft would not let us show any footage in Havana, and I always thought that was quite weird. Well, now you can probably see why I was hyping it up so much. It genuinely looks incredible. The overall layout is still the same as the original, don't get me wrong, but one change I really like is that they have opened up this northern section of the city. In the original Black Flag, this whole area was completely blocked off. Now it's fully explorable, and to be honest, it feels like it was always supposed to be a part of Havana. They've added a warehouse activity here and a few chests to find. It's not a huge expansion, don't get me wrong, but it's one of those additions that only improves Havana as a city without changing what people loved about it. But just going back to the warehouse activity I just mentioned, one thing I really like about these warehouse activities in this game is that they've added a little more context to them compared to the original warehouse activities. You still have the option to simply explore the area until you find the key yourself for the warehouse, but now you can also overhear guards talking, giving you clues about where it is. For example, in this clip, 2 guards are complaining because a monkey stole the bloody warehouse key. One of them tried to lure the monkey back by offering some wine to it, but the monkey ended up drinking the entire bottle before stealing even more. It's a humorous conversation, and it's also a really small addition, but little bits of environmental storytelling like that make exploration feel much more enjoyable. Instead of every objective just being a marker on the map, you're actually learning small stories about the world that you play. Another feature I absolutely love is something called local events. These are basically small mini tales that you can discover while exploring different islands and settlements. One that I found was about a monkey whose owner had died. The crew responsible had captured the monkey and locked it away aboard their ship. You can then board the ship, take out everyone on board and rescue the monkey. What surprised me most is that every single local event comes with unique dialogue from Edward. Throughout the game, you will constantly hear him commenting about everything he discovers, reacting to the world around him, or, talking to himself while exploring. I remember reading somewhere that Resynced has something like 10,000 new lines of dialogue, and after playing the game for myself, I do genuinely believe it. There were so many moments where Edward said something that I'd never heard before. And the best part about rescuing the monkey is that it doesn't disappear afterwards, because you can actually keep the monkey as a pet aboard the Jackdaw. It's a small addition, but it's exactly the kind of thing that makes exploring feel more rewarding. Another one I came across involved a woman searching for her husband, who had gone out to sea and never returned. She asked Edward to help figure out what happened to him. The funny thing is, I'd actually already completed most of this local event without even realizing it. Earlier while exploring, I randomly found a gold locket. Then when I eventually met this woman, it turned out the locket belonged to her husband, so all I needed to do was hand it over. It was a nice little moment because it made the world feel connected, instead of just every side activity existing completely on its own. There are also these side activities too, which consist of rescuing people before they are shot dead. And if you don't rescue them in time, the enemies holding them hostage will actually shoot them dead right in front of you. Now the good thing is, these prisoners will actually be sent to the Jackdaw as crew members, so it's not just a filler activity for no reason at all. Now, I want to quickly talk about treasure maps because they've been carried over pretty much exactly as they were in the original game, and I still think they're worth doing. The biggest reason is that many of the treasures reward you with Jackdaw design plans. So if you're wondering how to unlock new sails, new figureheads, wheels or other ship cosmetics, treasure maps are one of the main ways to do it. They're also really easy to complete. Each one takes about 30 seconds once you reach the island. You simply follow the coordinates on the map, head to the marked location, dig up the treasure and you're done. I do wonder if they could have made them a bit more challenging though. Part of me thinks they should have removed the coordinates entirely and made you rely on the treasure map itself to figure out where the treasure was buried. That would have made the treasure hunts themselves feel much more like, actual pirate treasure hunting. But, at the same time, I understand why they didn't. If all you had was a hand-drawn map, I can already imagine loads of people getting completely lost. And if Ubisoft had gone down that route, I think the rewards would have needed to be much better. Instead of just money and Jackdaw design plans, they'd probably need to include, new outfits, new weapons, or other exclusive gear to make the extra effort feel worthwhile. Then we have the Mayan stelae, and these have stayed almost exactly the same as they were in the original game. There are still 16 of them scattered across the Caribbean, and once you've collected them all, you head back to the assassin hideout in Tulum to claim the Mayan outfit. Now finding them is pretty straightforward because the map legend is incredibly generous. It pretty much tracks everything, so exploration never really becomes frustrating. What I really like though is how Ubisoft Singapore handled the Mayan outfit itself. If you remember, in the original game, you placed all the stones into the wall and the outfit was simply waiting there for you. It did the job, don't get me wrong, but that was about it. In Resynced, they didn't have to change this, but they did anyway. After placing the stones, you now have to parkour through this beautiful underground chamber before reaching the outfit. It's not some huge gameplay sequence, but it makes finally earning the Mayan outfit feel far more dramatic. It actually feels like you've uncovered a hidden assassin relic, instead of just picking an outfit off a mannequin. The Mayan outfit itself looks fantastic in the remake, and they've also made one change that I actually prefer, and I don't know if I'm the only one alone in this that likes this change, but basically, in the original game, if you remember, the armor itself gave you the ability to deflect bullets. Now that ability has been moved onto a trinket instead that you unlock alongside the outfit. So if you want the bullet deflection, you can equip the trinket. If you just like the look of the outfit, you can wear it without being forced into the perk. I actually think that's a much better system because it gives players more freedom. I think this is also a good time to talk about outfits in general because exploration plays a much bigger role in unlocking them now. As you can see, I've obtained quite a handful of outfits from my playing session. There are a few different ways to get outfits. You can still buy some from the general store. You can craft them through the treasury at Great Inagua, which I'll talk about later in the video. You can also get outfits from treasure maps, which I've talked about earlier. And this one is random, but I got the stealth outfit from a complete random assassination contract on the island of Newbone. So it feels very sporadic with how you can unlock outfits. And surprisingly, quite a few of them are unlocked through the Animus Hub. Now this might sound completely out of character coming from me because I've never been a fan of the Animus Hub, but weirdly it's actually starting to grow on me. The biggest reason is that none of these outfits are locked behind microtransactions. You simply play the game, naturally earn keys, or you can find keys, which is something they've added, which is a big W. Then you spend those keys in either the projects menu to advance that specific project, or in the exchange to unlock these outfits. It's all free, and I would take this system any day of the week over having to buy outfits with real money. My favorite way of unlocking outfits though is simply by exploring the world. Take the brown cloak for example. In the original Black Flag, you just walked into a general store and bought it. That was it. In Resynced, I randomly discovered it inside a chest while exploring Havana. That's exactly how rewards like this should work. When you stumble across something valuable while exploring instead of buying it from a shop, it actually feels rewarding because you found that yourself. I also love that Black Island, Mystery Island and Sacrifice Island have all been integrated into the base game map. If you want to wear in the original Black Flag, these three islands were only available through the Illustrious Pirate Pack DLC. Now they are seamlessly part of the world. Better yet, each island has its own unique rewards. While exploring Black Island, I found the Captain Morgan outfit hidden away in a chest. And to be honest, it's one of my favorite outfits in the game. Over on Mystery Island, you can find Stede Bonnet's outfit. And on Sacrifice Island, you can find Captain Drake's outfit. You know, knowing modern Ubisoft, they very easily could have turned these into premium store cosmetics or locked them away inside the Animus Hub. Thankfully, they didn't. They put them out in the world for players to discover naturally. And I really hope that's something they continue doing in future games. And speaking of discovering things naturally, actually wait, no, this segue doesn't make sense at all. But regardless, let's talk about animal hunting, because this was something I was very worried about, but I'd say I'm 90% positive towards it and 10% negative. Now, just like in the original game, the Caribbean is filled with a shit ton of wildlife. You've got jaguars, black jaguars, monkeys, boars, crocodiles, deer, sharks, whales, pretty much every animal you'd expect to find. And hunting them is directly tied to your progression. Every piece of gear requires different animal skins and pelts. Your pistol holsters, your smoke bomb pouch, blowpipe upgrades, medicine pouch, health upgrades, all of this stuff depends on the animals that you hunt. I've always liked this system because it gives hunting an actual purpose instead of just being another side activity. That said, I do think they could have expanded on it a little more. It would have been really cool if the weapon you used actually affected the quality of the materials. Imagine shooting an animal with a pistol and getting a damaged pelt, but if you used your hidden blade, you got a clean skin that's worth more. Little mechanics like that would have made hunting feel much deeper. As it stands though, the best strategy that I found is kind of broken. You can simply put almost every animal to sleep with the blowpipe. You walk up to it and perform an assassination. It works on pretty much everything, with crocodiles being the one exception if I remember correctly. You might notice in this gameplay that there's no health bars. That's because I turned them off. And trust me when I say this, it completely changes the game. Even if you're somebody who likes health bars, I would genuinely recommend giving it a try. Just turn it off. Hunting feels so much better when you're not staring at a health bar over every animal. It actually feels like you're tracking and hunting wildlife instead of chopping away at an enemy with a massive pool of health. You know, I'll be honest, if I ever ended up in a straight up sword fight against an animal, I would probably reload my save. I get way more satisfaction from stalking the prey, putting it to sleep and then taking it out with a clean assassination. It fits the fantasy of being a hunter far better than a sword fight. I mean, who likes sword fighting animals? I know I don't. And then there's harpooning, and this is another activity that I really enjoyed because it isn't the same encounter repeated over and over again. There's actually a good amount of variety here. You can hunt bull sharks, hammerhead sharks, humpback whales, killer whales, and each one behaves differently. Take the bull shark for example. You have to react quickly and land your harpoon before it charges straight at the boat. Humpback whales are completely different. They will dive beneath the surface before bursting out of the water, giving you a small window to land your harpoon before they crash down. As you'd expect, the larger the animal, the tougher the hunt becomes. They can take far more punishment and demand much better timing if you want to bring them down. It's a surprisingly fun side activity, and because every hunt plays out a little differently, it never really became repetitive for me. So yeah, overall I'd say animal hunting and harpooning in Resynced is still a lot of fun. I just think the land animals had the potential to be even better with a few extra mechanics if they borrowed from a game like, Red Dead Redemption 2 or even one of their older games like Assassin's Creed 3. There's also the diving bell side of exploration. Now this one I'd say is the most faithfully recreated side activity in the game compared to the original. You essentially dive underwater at certain dive spots throughout the map. You can find a certain amount of chests, which do give you some pretty good money to be fair, all whilst trying to avoid not drowning, but also avoiding the big bloody shark that wants to eat your ass. Wait, pause. And then there are the forts, and I'll be honest, these are my guilty pleasures. One thing I like is that they give you a really good sense of progression. Some forts can be taken down without too much trouble, while others will absolutely humble you and remind you that your jackdaw isn't worth shit. The forts give you a clear goal to work towards. The basic idea of taking down a fort is quite simple. First, you bombard the fort from your ship and destroy its defenses. Once you've created an opening, you head inside. You take out the guards to lower the fort's morale, smash through the main gate like your Eivor bloody Varinsdottir, and finally assassinate the fort commander. Once that person is dead, the fort becomes yours. Now, the rewards are absolutely worth it as well. You get a shit ton of reals, plenty of resources for upgrading the jackdaw, and taking over forts also clears sections of the map, making exploration much safer. So I would highly recommend making forts a priority as you progress through the game. Not only are they fun to complete, but they're one of the best ways to strengthen the ship. Whenever I play these, I can't help but think they're what eventually inspired the raids in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Is that just me? Obviously the execution is very different, but it feels like the overall structure feels like the foundation for that system. I think this is a good time to talk about the naval side of the game, because the naval side of the game might be the best pirate ship gameplay ever made. Well, granted there is a huge amount of competition, but even so it's incredibly impressive. Simply sailing around the Caribbean while your crew sings the new sea shanties is weirdly therapeutic. I'm not even joking, you can find music sheets scattered across most islands, and they're quite easy to collect. Since Resynced adds so many new sea shanties, you're going to constantly hear something different while sailing. My favourite new one has to be the Burn Blackbeard's Beard. It's a little strange for your crew to be singing about burning Blackbeard's beard, but it's ridiculously catchy. The naval presentation itself is on another level compared to the original, which is expected. The difference is actually night and day. Whichever person or team worked on the water tech in the Anvil engine deserves a raise, and they deserve some serious credit because it looks unbelievable. I mean, the water foams naturally as it would in real life. That's such a small detail, but it's something you almost never see in video games. I mean, when do you see water foaming? The weather has seen a huge improvement as well in the open sea. Storms actually feel very dangerous now. You can't properly open your sails. Massive waves throw the jackdaw around. I mean, your visibility literally drops dramatically and you can barely see shit. When you're trying to fight enemy ships in the middle of one of these storms, it's about as close as I've ever felt to playing a pirate simulator. Now, when it comes to naval combat, I want to focus on the naval contracts for this part because they've changed quite a bit. Black Flag Resynced introduces a brand new character named Milo van der Graaf. Early in the game, you might meet him randomly on one of the islands you explore. He briefly tells Edward that they'll meet again before mysteriously disappearing, which, thinking of it now, is a little creepy because you have no idea who he is at this point in the game. Later on, once you've established Great Inagua, he shows up again and becomes the person responsible for handing out naval contracts. I actually like this change because in the original Black Flag, Milo's name existed, but he was never a real character, like physically. Now there's an actual face behind these missions, which makes the contracts feel much more connected to the world. The contracts themselves are also worth doing. You're already going to be sinking every enemy ship while exploring the Caribbean, so you might as well take a contract beforehand and earn extra rewards at the same time. It just gives your naval battles a bit more purpose. The combat itself is still incredibly satisfying. Once you've upgraded the Jackdaw enough, you genuinely feel like you're unstoppable. Enemy ships that used to terrify you suddenly become easy targets, and you actually feel the progression. Well, that is until you run into one of the 4 legendary ships. They're all still there, sitting in the corners of the map waiting for you, and they're going to remind you very quickly that your Jackdaw still isn't invincible, and you need to upgrade it fast. There's also Assassination Contracts, but these are self-explanatory. I've already talked about these in my 3-hour preview video, so every single thing I said there applies here too. Just make sure you do the optional objectives, because for 1, it's very easy, and for 2, it's literally free money. Now let's talk about the Templar hunts, because if we're being completely honest, these are probably the best set of side activities in any of the older Assassin's Creed games. Definitely up there with the Captain Kidd missions in AC3. Back in the 2013 original, I absolutely love these Templar hunts because of the sheer amount of narrative effort put into them. These aren't, generic fetch quests or anything like that, as they are storylines that actually expanded the assassin lore by giving us more context on the assassins and Templars in this time. So seeing them completely remade with modern motion capture, mind you, so they didn't cheapen out, thankfully, as well as the updated visuals in Resynced is just so incredibly refreshing. You're still tracking down the 5 keys from different targets scattered across the Caribbean, but Ubisoft Singapore has reworked the environments to support the modern fluid parkour system, making these actual Templar hunts feel way more fun to play. I mean, take Anto for example. Parkouring with him in the remake is a blast, and hey, let's be honest, Apita is an absolute baddie in this remake. I mean, even Rona as well. These are good characters. Of course, the ultimate goal of completing these Templar hunts is heading back to the Great Inagua hideout to unlock the cage containing the Templar armor. And let me tell you, the Templar armor in the remake looks fantastic. The fabric textures, the leather detailing, all the metallic accents look absolutely pristine, especially under the new lighting engine. It feels like a genuine high tier reward for the effort that you put in doing these Templar hunts. I highly recommend that people prioritize these hunts and obtain this armor as early as possible. It is entirely worth the effort. Now, alongside being a remake of the 2013 game, Black Flag Resynced also adds around 6 hours of brand new story content. I played through all of it, and since a lot of it ties directly into the main story, this section will contain spoilers. Now, before I talk about the new story content itself, I want to give a bit of context. Darby McDevitt is the lead writer on the original Black Flag, which is a big reason why the story is still regarded as one of the best in the franchise. Almost all of the new story content in Resynced was written by Ubisoft Singapore and their unknown writers, and I'll be honest, the difference in writing quality between the Darby McDevitt written main story and Ubisoft Singapore's new material is quite noticeable. It really hits you once you start playing these new missions. It's not bad, don't get me wrong, it's not like what Ubisoft Quebec are doing, but playing through the new content makes you miss the old Ubisoft writing. That's probably my biggest criticism of the added content, but aside from that, I do think the new content is necessary and well implemented. The first new quest I want to talk about is Blackbeard's treasure hunt. This is a completely optional side quest that lasts around 15 to 20 minutes. In the original Black Flag, once Blackbeard sadly meets his end, that's the end of it. However, Black Flag Resynced gives him a final send-off. After his death, Edward recovers Blackbeard's hat, and hidden inside the hat is a treasure map. I do like that the CGI trailer plays again, but instead of Edward looking into the camera, he looks at the treasure map. That kicks off the quest as you follow the map across the Caribbean until it eventually leads you into a hidden cove. I actually thought the journey to the treasure was pretty well designed. There's a nice underwater section as you make your way through the caves before finally reaching the treasure chest. Of course, you're not the only one looking for it, so you end up fighting a group of bandits who have also tracked it down. Once you've dealt with them and reached the end, you finally open Blackbeard's treasure. Only, it isn't treasure at all. Instead of finding gold or jewels, which is what Edward would prefer at this point in his story, the chest is filled with farming tools and supplies to help Great Inagua grow into a thriving settlement. I actually thought that was a nice touch, because think about it, throughout Black Flag, Blackbeard constantly talks about creating a place where pirates... Is that a race car? The fuck was that? Blackbeard constantly talks about creating a place where pirates can live freely without governments or empires controlling them. In this quest, the resources to help Great Inagua become the kind of community he's always dreamed about. Now, I can see why some people might find this a little bit strange. The real Blackbeard in history is remembered as somebody who carefully built up a terrifying reputation and used fear as one of his greatest weapons. Seeing him leave behind farming equipment probably is not the direction most people would expect for Blackbeard. But thinking of it now, in the context of Assassin's Creed Black Flag, it works quite well. It fits the version of Blackbeard that the game spent its entire story building, and we know Blackbeard wanted retirement. By the end of the quest, you witness Great Inagua continue to grow into an even stronger safe haven because of what Blackbeard left behind. Overall, I think it's a decent addition. I wouldn't call this amazing, but it's a nice little farewell for his character. The biggest positive is that it's completely optional. Nothing here interrupts or changes the main story at all, which I'm very glad about. I still wish these new scenes had received motion capture because they stick out compared to the original cutscenes. The next piece of story content I want to talk about is Stede Bonnet's questline. In the original Black Flag, Stede Bonnet kind of disappears from the story. The last we really hear about him is through two guards mentioning that he was hanged. It always felt like his character deserved a better conclusion, and thankfully Black Flag Resynced tries to give him one. Like Blackbeard's treasure hunt, this optional quest lasts about 15 to 20 minutes. It starts when Edward receives a letter at his mansion in Great Inagua. The letter is from Stede Bonnet himself, explaining that he's been imprisoned, but before being captured, he hid his valuables inside a chest on Mystery Island, and he asked Edward Kenway to recover them. Meet his crew there, and once Stede Bonnet is free, he will meet Edward there. So we sail off to Mystery Island, and that's where things immediately take a dark turn. You discover the wreck of Stede Bonnet's ship and learn that some of his own crew have mutinied against him. They stole the key to his valuables and fled to the island. Alongside the loyal crew members who stayed by his side, Edward hunts down the mutineers, recovers the key and makes his way back toward the wreck. And just as you think it's wrapping up, the British Royal Navy arrives, and they are not there for Edward Kenway. They're there to seize Stede Bonnet's belongings. At that moment, it's pretty obvious that something has happened to him, hence why the Royal Navy has arrived. You can already put the pieces together before the game outright tells you. After fighting off the Royal Navy, Edward enters Stede's quarters inside the wreck. There you find a series of letters. One is his diary, and it talks about Stede's dream of returning to the open sea and chasing new adventures. But it's the second letter that really hits. Stede reflects on the fact that he's about to be hanged, and yes, it's another one of the new cutscenes that is not motion captured. I had to get that one last jab in there. Still, despite that, I actually thought the ending landed quite well. The music during the scene is excellent, and I'm pretty sure this is a brand new soundtrack, and it does a lot of the heavy lifting emotionally. So yeah, overall I think this Stede Bonnet quest is a little stronger than Blackbeard's treasure hunt. It's still not on the same level as anything remotely close in the main story, but it gives Stede Bonnet a nice farewell instead of simply having his fate mentioned in passing, and I do genuinely think that's something his character deserved. Now let's move on to the new officer characters, Lucy Baldwin, the Padre and Deadman Smith. I have completed all three of their quest lines and unlocked their jackdaw abilities, and I have to say the abilities are ridiculously strong. If you want your jackdaw to become an absolute powerhouse, I would highly recommend prioritizing these quest lines as soon as you can. The Padre's ability in particular is completely busted, as you can ram enemy ships with ease and they take a shit ton of damage. Deadman Smith unlocks double firing, which is literally double the damage, and Lucy's okay, I guess. She has a brace ability which helps when ships ram you, which in this game is quite rare. But let's actually start with Lucy Baldwin. Now during my 3-hour preview video, I wasn't very impressed with the short section of a questline that I got to play. I thought her writing and character seemed a bit generic. After finishing her entire storyline, my opinion honestly has not changed a single bit. I just don't think Lucy is a very good character. She feels really out of place in Black Flag. It almost comes across like Ubisoft felt like they needed to add another big female character alongside Mary, Reeden and Bonnie, so they created one without really considering whether she would fit the world. Her personality never really clicked with me either. She's constantly bossing Edward around, which I just hate seeing, and even threatens him at one point after Edward sees her crying. It all feels very forced.
You tell anyone you saw me cry, and I'll bury you next to that fucking barrister.
Not a word.
The storyline itself didn't do much for me either. It's centered around a family dispute between her, her father and her grandfather, and if I'm being honest, I never really bought the idea that Edward would care enough to get involved. Compared to everything else happening in the game, it just felt very disconnected from his journey. So overall, I came away pretty disappointed with both the character and her questline. Thankfully, the other officers are much stronger. The Padre was easily the standout for me. He's a former pirate who abandoned that life to become a priest, and his village was burned to the ground. His story follows his search to avenge his deceased friends, eventually leading Edward and the Padre into a confrontation with a corrupt bishop. I thought that was a genuinely interesting premise. It felt like something that belonged in Black Flag's world, and the ending is surprisingly dark. After everything that happens, you literally hang the bishop. It isn't the happiest story, but that's exactly why I enjoyed it. The Padre actually feels like somebody who could have existed alongside the original cast of characters, and his questline was one of the better pieces of new writing in the remake. And then there's Deadman Smith, and while I wouldn't say he's an amazing character, he's definitely a lot stronger than Lucy Baldwin. You first meet him during the A World Without Gold chapter, which I'll talk about in a bit, where he's literally being transported as a prisoner inside a wooden crate and was forced to work for Robert Maynard. Right from the start, it's obvious that this is somebody who's been through a shit ton of unimaginable abuse. His backstory is genuinely tragic. He talks about the life he once had, the people he cared about, how all of that was taken away from him. It's pretty depressing. His personal questline revolves around hunting down the slavers who turned his life into a living hell, and I actually enjoyed his quest quite a bit. It tells a story I wasn't expecting Ubisoft to tackle, especially considering that they cancelled an Assassin's Creed game that was reportedly set during the American Civil War. The themes here are dark, and they don't shy away from the brutality of slavery. I thought Ubisoft Singapore handled it quite well. It doesn't try to make Deadman Smith into some over-the-top character like Lucy who's just annoying as hell. Instead, it focuses on somebody who's carrying years of trauma, while finally getting the chance to confront the people responsible. Overall, I think his storyline is pretty good. It's not perfect, but it is one of the stronger pieces of new writing in the remake. And then we get to the biggest piece of new content in the entire game, the brand new story chapter named A World Without Gold. Just like the other new quests, this chapter is completely optional, which I'm really happy about. It doesn't interrupt the pacing of the main story like Sequence 12 and 13 do in Assassin's Creed 2, if you remember that. If you want to play it, you can. If not, you can finish Edward's story without ever touching it. This chapter is 8 missions long, lasting around an hour and a half, and it revolves around hunting down Robert Maynard, the man responsible for killing Blackbeard. Now, I actually got a little excited at the beginning. The opening 5 minutes are fully motion captured, and I genuinely thought, yes, Ubisoft has put proper effort into presenting this new story with nope, never mind. The motion capture stopped after 5 minutes. The opening few minutes are mocapped, the final few minutes are mocapped, I think, and everything in between, which is about 95%, is not. For such a long chapter, and one that's very important to the main story, it was quite disappointing. But putting my motion capture complaints aside, because I always talk about it and I hate talking about it, actually no I don't. How is the actual story? Well, to be honest, I liked it. One thing I found interesting is that the chapter gives your recruited officers something to do. After you recruit them in the base game, they mostly fade into the background. So it's definitely interesting to see them getting some proper screen time and playing a role in the story. That said, I also think this ends up creating one of the chapter's biggest problems. The whole chapter makes your officer characters feel a bit forced into the plot. If you think about it, a chapter about avenging Blackbeard should naturally revolve around the people who were actually closest to him. Edward Kenway, and Bonnie, and anybody else who was still around that genuinely knew him. Instead, so much of the focus is on characters like Lucy, the Padre and Deadman Smith, even though they've never met Blackbeard or had any type of connection to him. It ends up feeling a little artificial. Personally, I think the chapter would have been a lot stronger if it was simply Edward Kenway hunting down Maynard himself along with Bonnie, especially since we see this scene in the main story where both of them reminisce about the people that they've lost. That to me feels much more personal than turning it into this Avengers style team up with a bunch of characters who don't really have any stake in what happened to Blackbeard. Since this is such a long questline, I don't want to spoil everything, so I'll keep things fairly broad. Even though I don't think these characters should have been the main focus, the chapter does flesh them out quite a bit, which I appreciate. Deadman Smith, for example, gets the most development, with the story diving into his past and explaining why he fights. His backstory is pretty tragic. Padre also gets a decent amount to do, while Lucy Baldwin probably gets the most screen time out of everyone. I've never really liked Lucy as a character, and even after this chapter, I still don't think she fits Black Flag at all. My favourite part though was the final mission. The final mission genuinely captured the feeling of playing the original Black Flag again. There are proper set piece moments where you're escaping an exploding area, some really fun naval encounters, and one particular creative battle against a massive ship that I thought was excellent. Even without proper motion capture, the finale still manages to deliver some genuinely emotional moments, which surprised me. Overall, I still enjoy the world without gold, even if I don't think it reaches its full potential. Robert Maynard gets a satisfying conclusion, and just like the treasure hunt quest, it expands on Blackbeard's legacy in a way that actually feels worthwhile. I just wish the story had kept the focus on Edward instead of trying to make your recruited officers a major part of it. Even with that criticism, I still came away feeling like this chapter was a meaningful addition instead of content that was added for the sake of it. But again, the one thing that keeps dragging it down is the lack of motion capture. Please, Ubisoft, you have the resources, just mocap your goddamn scenes. That's all I ask. Ah yes, the replacement for the modern day. Instead of the modern day story from the original Black Flag, Resynced introduces 4 optional Animus riffs. Each one explores a different what if scenario. The first asks what if Edward had kept his promise to Caroline. The second is what if Blackbeard accepted the king's pardon and ruled Nassau. The third explores what if Mary Read had walked away from the assassins. And the fourth one asks that what if you, the player, became a Templar. When I first heard about the riffs, I actually thought we'd get fully directed cutscenes showing these alternate timelines. Maybe even short playable missions with proper cinematics, but maybe I shouldn't have had any expectations for Ubisoft because that expectation disappeared pretty quickly. Instead, the riffs mostly reuse existing assets while you walk through this Animus Hub simulation that, if I'm being honest, I still don't really understand, nor do I care about it at all. AI voices narrate each scenario as you move forward throughout the level, explaining what's happening. The stories themselves are fairly easy to follow, but the presentation is just so incredibly low effort. The first rift was honestly a slog. I wanted it to end immediately. The second wasn't quite as bad, but it still didn't do much for me. It did eventually have you fighting a digital version of Blackbeard, which was certainly a choice. Thankfully, I thought the last two were noticeably stronger. The Mary Read rift was easily my favorite. Instead of simply walking around listening to narration through reused assets, it actually gives you a unique stealth section. A giant spotlight constantly scans the environment while you're trying to sneak past enemies without being detected. It feels different from the rest of the game, and because Mary Read is one of my favorite characters in Black Flag, seeing an alternate version of her story was genuinely interesting. And then there's the final rift. I don't know what the fuck was happening. The whole time I was just sitting there thinking, what are we doing? More than anything, it reminded me how much I missed the modern day. This does not feel like a modern day evolution. It feels like fantasy blended in as science fiction. I will give it one compliment though, it was genuinely cool seeing environments built using previous assets from the older Assassin's Creed games. Well, I say older Assassin's Creed games, its origins onwards. You can spot Egyptian pyramids, buildings from feudal Japan, the longboat from Valhalla, and plenty of other callbacks. It was a nice touch, and it makes sense that Ubisoft reused environments from the newer Anvil Engine games instead of trying to recreate settings from AC2 or AC3. But overall, the rifts just weren't for me. Out of the 4, I really enjoyed 1. The other 3 ranged from forgettable to outright boring. I'm sure there will be people out there who somehow like these, especially if you enjoy the more soulless side of Assassin's Creed lore, but me personally, I would have taken the original Black Flag modern day over these every single time. Okay, so I've spent a ton of time talking about the new story content, but now I want to move on to what I think is the single best addition in the entire remake. And that's the completely overhauled Great Inagua. In the original Black Flag, Great Inagua was your home base. It already felt alive and was one of my favorite locations in the game. Black Flag Resynced takes that foundation and expands on it in almost every way imaginable. The first big addition is a brand new character named Bernard. I won't spoil who he is and his backstory because discovering that is part of the fun, but just know he's a very mysterious person. He acts as the mansion's butler and helps Edward rebuild the estate throughout the game. Bernard also has his own side quest. These mostly revolve around finding portraits hidden throughout the Caribbean, and each one you recover reveals a little more about who he really is. Even outside those quests, he constantly wanders around the mansion making comments and interacting with the environment. It sounds like a small thing, but it makes the place feel much more lived in. The mansion also introduces a new mechanic called protection money. If you played Assassin's Creed Unity, you'll immediately recognize a similar system. As you renovate Great Inagua, the amount of money waiting for you steadily increases. Eventually, it caps out at 5,000 reals every 30 minutes, which makes it a fantastic source of passive income. The mansion itself is also far more customizable than before. You can decorate almost every room with paintings, vases, ornaments, and other collectibles that you find while exploring the world. Now I like this a lot because it gives exploration another purpose. Instead of just collecting something for the sake of ticking a box, those items that you collect that you may think are junk, well, you can actually bring those items home and display them. Even better, you can finally display your equipment. Your swords, your pistols, and best of all, your outfits could all be showcased inside the mansion. The last time we had something similar like this was the Legacy Room in Assassin's Creed Unity, so it's great to see something similar return. I do wish there was more armor stands because at the moment there's only one, but even then, seeing your favorite outfit displayed in the mansion gives you a real sense of progression. Outside the mansion, the renovation system has also been expanded. In the original game, every building only had a single upgrade. Now most buildings have multiple tiers, and every upgrade noticeably improves what it offers. Take the general store for example. The general store can now be upgraded 3 times, with each level expanding the selection of items, including higher quality animal skins and pelts. The Harbour Master works the same way, giving you access to even better upgrades for the Jackdaw as you invest more into it. There are also entirely new buildings to construct. My personal favourite is the Treasurer. This building lets you restore incomplete treasure maps that you've collected throughout the world, making treasure hunting much more rewarding. It's also where you can craft several unique outfits, although you'll need plenty of animal skins and pelts to unlock them. Another new addition is the Fisherman's Wharf, which doubles the materials that you receive from hunting sea animals. If you're planning on fully upgrading the Jackdaw, it is an incredibly useful building to have. On top of that, every renovation contributes to your protection money income, so the more you invest into Great Inagua, the more profitable it becomes. And finally, once you've fully restored everything on the island and collected all the portraits for Bernard, the game rewards you with an exclusive outfit. It's a nice incentive to see the renovation system through to the end. And hey, to be honest, upgrading Great Inagua in this remake became one of my favourite things to do throughout the entire game. I think now is the perfect time to talk about the gameplay, and I saved it for last, but more specifically the combat, parkour and stealth. Let's start with the combat. Back when I made my preview video after playing the game for 3 hours, I said I was a little worried that the combat might become stale over time. Now that I've put more than 50 hours into the bloody game, I think that concern was slightly justified. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually think the combat system is quite good. It combines the cinematic style of the older Assassin's Creed games with a more modern hitbox-based system. You still get those satisfying kill animations, but now you also have light and heavy attacks that let you engage enemies more directly. The best part of the combat, without question, is chaining takedowns together. It feels incredibly satisfying flowing from one enemy to the next, dropping each of them with a single clean strike. When everything clicks together, combat looks fantastic. The rope dart also plays a huge role, pulling enemies towards you before kicking them onto the ground or kicking them into destructible environments for an instant takedown never gets old. Against the larger enemies, I found the fastest strategy was often to fire a pistol shot at them so it stuns them and then immediately finish them off before they could recover. That said, the combat does have flaws. The biggest disappointment for me is still the removal of the hidden blade combat and unarmed combat. Those two styles added so much variety to the original, and without them you're mostly relying on swords for the entire game. The thing is though, the game isn't really designed around long sword fights. Almost every enemy dies in 1 or 2 hits, and that's intentional. Ubisoft clearly wants you to focus on fast executions and counter kills and tools and takedowns instead of standing there trading blows for 20 seconds. I will say, if you're constantly hacking away at enemies, then you're probably playing the game wrong. My biggest criticism has to be the lack of takedown variety. I'm not exaggerating when I say it feels like there are maybe 4 or 5 standard takedown animations that you will see over and over again. Within an hour or 2, you've pretty much seen everything the game has to offer, and after that, the repetition distance starts to become noticeable. I really hope Ubisoft does not try to add new finishers as post-launch content, because that's the last thing I want. Please do not treat this game like it's a live service game. I also noticed that double takedowns are surprisingly rare. Most of the time after parrying an enemy, the takedown prompt appears immediately, so you just execute that one target. The only time I consistently managed to trigger a double takedown was when I parried one enemy, did not get the prompt to take them down, then immediately parried a second enemy. Only then would the game sometimes let you execute both enemies at once. Even then, there only seems to be 2 or 3 different double takedown animations. That's really my biggest issue with the combat as a whole. Mechanically, I think it's actually very solid. It feels responsive and chaining kills together is super fun. I just wish there was a lot more variety to stop it from feeling repetitive once you've spent a dozen amount of hours with it. And then we have stealth, and this is probably my biggest gameplay disappointment. Stealth is broken, and unfortunately I don't mean that in the good way. The only thing I do like about the stealth is the blowpipe. Being able to put enemies and animals to sleep before quietly assassinating them feels fantastic, and it is easily one of the most useful tools in your arsenal. The problem is the enemy detection. It is unbelievably inconsistent. There were so many times where I'd perform a stealth assassination completely out of sight, from behind an enemy with nobody looking in my direction, and somehow you'd still get detected. The guards did not hear anything, they were not facing me, there was nothing that should have alerted them, yet suddenly the entire camp knew where I was. It's especially strange because Shadows has some of the best stealth AI in the entire franchise, and since Resynced is built from Shadows foundation, I genuinely don't understand how the stealth detection ended up being this bad. One thing that really annoyed me was how bushes work. You can have an enemy looking directly at you, but if there's a bush completely blocking their line of sight, the game often behaves as though there is no bush there at all. They'll detect you straight through it, which completely defeats the point of using environmental cover in the first place. The rope dart hang is another mechanic that feels almost pointless. Every time I tried hanging somebody from a tree, I'd somehow end up getting spotted, even when there was no guard anywhere nearby. Again, it all comes back to that broken detection system behaving in ways that just don't make sense. And it doesn't stop there. Let's say you do get detected and you manage to escape, and you eventually become anonymous again. Even then, the game refuses to let you fast travel or interact with certain objects because it still thinks you're being chased. The exact same issue applies to animals. There were multiple occasions where I'd be crouched inside a bush, completely behind an animal, only for it to somehow notice me anyway. Stealth is one area that really needs work. The core mechanics are all there, don't get me wrong, and when everything functions properly it can be a lot of fun. But right now the enemy detection is so inconsistent that it feels like you're fighting the AI more than you're actually sneaking around it. And last but not least, we have parkour. Now parkour is something I think this game does quite well. Going into Resynced, I was a little worried because it is still built on the RPG movement system introduced in Origins. I know that's going to disappoint people who wanted a complete return to the classic Black Flag mechanics, but after spending a long time with the game and parkouring, I came away impressed with how Ubisoft Singapore adapted that system to fit Black Flag's world. The biggest reason it works is because the environments have clearly been redesigned around movement. Havana and Kingston in particular are fantastic to traverse. There are far more opportunities to chain movements together, and the cities naturally guide you across rooftops without constantly dropping you back down onto the streets. It never feels like Ubisoft simply copied the 2013 map into a newer engine. They've actually gone through and reworked the architecture so the movement flow is better, while still keeping each city instantly recognizable. I like that you can actually descend downward to street level, a simple but very useful mechanic instead of, jumping down. I think most people will focus on the core parkour here, but to me the big highlight was the tree parkour. It is so satisfying, and I'm so glad it returns. I love the tree parkour in the frontier in Assassin's Creed 3, and this gave me that same feeling again, especially in the jungle. I do wish Shadows could have had tree parkour, but alas, that's a missed opportunity. Manual jump is another huge improvement. It feels responsive and finally gives you much more control over where Edward goes. It also makes leaving ropes, beams and other objects far less frustrating than it has been in recent Assassin's Creed games. Wall run animation cancels have also returned, which thank God, and these open up a lot more room to optimize movement and find, more faster routes across the cities. That doesn't mean it's perfect. The RPG engine still has some of its old habits. Every now and then, Edward will hesitate before climbing onto an object, which will force you to lose momentum between certain animations, or get caught on bits of rooftop geometry. Thankfully, these moments were nowhere near as common as they were in Shadows, and they never reached the point where they became frustrating. My biggest complaint isn't the actual movement itself though, it's the controls. I just wish that Ubisoft had let us sprint by holding R2 like the older games. Unfortunately, R2 is permanently tied to your tools and gadgets, making it impossible even with custom remapping. Sprint is still bound to clicking the left stick, and while I eventually got used to it, it never felt as natural or as reliable as simply holding down the trigger. This also means the classic high and low profile control philosophy is still absent, and because you sprint with L3, it stops your sprint every time you climb a building or chase a music page. One small addition I don't really like is that you perform a perfect landing roll after a big drop, and this causes Edward Kenway to completely avoid taking any type of fall damage. This doesn't make sense at all because it just complements the RPG only fans, because why is Edward Kenway, a regular human being, being able to not take fall damage? He is not Cassandra, he's not Eivor, he's not, who else, Alexios or a demigod. He's a normal human being. So yeah, overall I think Ubisoft Singapore deserves a lot of credit here. Is it the same parkour system as the original Black Flag? No, but once you accept that, you'll find yourself having a great time moving around the Caribbean. The redesigned cities complement the movement really well, the new mechanics add more control than the previous RPG games, and despite a few lingering issues, this is easily my favourite parkour iteration in the modern Assassin's Creed parkour system. This and I'd say Assassin's Creed Mirage. Sadly, it's nowhere near what Revelations is capable of. I don't think we'll ever return to that. And there we have it. I came away really impressed with Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced. It isn't a perfect remake and I don't think anyone expected it to be. There are definitely things that need work. The stealth AI can be really bad, as I just said, and some of the new content doesn't reach the quality of the original story. I still wish Ubisoft had done more with the controls and brought back the classic high and low profile system. But despite all of those nitpicks or negatives or criticisms you could say, I do think this is now the definitive way to play Black Flag. It keeps everything that made the original game special while improving so many areas around it. If you're somebody who's never played Black Flag before, first of all, why would you watch this video when there's a bunch of spoilers involved? But more importantly, I could not think of a better place to experience it for the first time. And if you're a long-time fan like me and you've played Black Flag before already, I think you'll find plenty to love here as well, even if a few decisions leave you scratching your head. Let me know what you think of Black Flag Resynced down in the comments below when you play it, or, you know, based on my opinions in this video. And with all of that said, I will see you all in the next one.